Hey, Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bashem, Yahweh Shai, Bashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone for teaching us his truth and salutations to the sincere Akim and Aqua, they may listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will is always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I just wanted to go through this topic in regards to solitude and understanding that solitude isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? And essentially isn't also, it can be looked also as an opportunity for confrontation. And when I say confrontation, I mean confronting yourself, confronting, bad habits, confronting you know pretty much using it as an opportunity to examine, right? To examine yourself, look at yourself, and essentially renew that old man, right? I'm sorry, renew that new man, essentially in righteousness, and put on, as Paul said, put on therefore the elect, right? So what I really wanted to do is just touch on this topic in regards to solitude, because, as I was meditating in regards to, certain events that played out, a few years ago, it doesn't, this kingdom doesn't promote a certain type of vibration when it comes to looking inwardly in regards to confronting demons, confronting their own problems, trying to reform themselves to be better. It kind of glosses over the fact that everybody is a 10, a type of culture where it's essentially it promotes a sentiment and a heavy vibration of pride. As a matter of fact, I didn't really have anything written down, but I sincerely pray and hope that this lesson is edifying, right? Let me just get this. Just bear with me 1 second. This is Second Ezra chapter 8, verse 50. And it says, "For many great miseries shall be done to them that are in the latter time that dwell in the world, because they have walked in great pride," right? And I'm reading this, just to get an understanding. This is the type of vibration that we live in. We live in a kingdom that constantly promotes pride. It promotes lovers of self rather than lovers of the Most High. And when you go into pride is just one of those things that the Lord hates, right? The scriptures say that pride is not made for men. It's the type of vibration that is, when you look at the just the nature of not just the heathens but also our people too, where they boast essentially in the things that they have, right? Whether it might be the comfortable position they might be having at their job, they boast in their so-called accomplishments. You know what I'm saying? They don't essentially boast in Yahweh Bashim Shai, right? So I'm kind of going through this to show you the importance of solitude, because solitude is also an opportunity to develop, to work on ourselves, and just using it as a method to just self-examine, right? Is an opportunity to self-examine, get closer to the Lord. You know what I'm saying? Because all these different things that pride, like I'm referring to, that are a lot of these people boast in, it's just going to pass away. And the scriptures say that the fashion of this world passeth away. And all these different things, it's nothing. It's Paul counted it all as dung. Think about that. Like he grew up as a Pharisee, right? And he called all those things but dung, right? He didn't boast, in the law, so on and so forth. But the point really is that pride, that's a very that's a very that's a stench in the Lord's nose, right? So in regards to solitude, it just is an opportunity to essentially make your, essentially as an opportunity to make your supplication. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna get two words. So I want to get the word solitude. And it says solitude here. It says the state of being alone, remoteness from society. It says loneliness, being alone, lonely place, desert, wilderness, alone, right? I don't really like to say, I don't really like that word alone too much, even though you're, or rather, I should say, I don't really like the word loneliness because you're not really lonely, if you're spiritual, because Yahweh Shai said, lo, I am with you, right? All to the ends of the earth, to roughly paraphrase, right? So, yes, you have moments where you are alone, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? You have moments and you're with people, but you also have moments when you're alone, right? So, let me just read this here. This is Mark chapter 1, verse 35, and it says, and in the morning, rising up a great while before the day, he went out and departed into a solitary place and prayed, right? So even Yahweh Shai had moments when he was by himself, right? Not every moment is going to be an opportunity. You're always going to be by, around brothers or be around people, right? And even if you're around people, you're still essentially, I don't want to say lonely, but you're still kind of alone in a sense, because the vibration that the frequency that a lot of these people operate, it's not in tandem with the spiritual frequency that you're emitting. So because as the scriptures talk about how wisdom is too high for a fool, there's no connection there when you're around a lot of these people, right? So even though when you're around people, you're still alone, right? But using it as an opportunity to confront yourself, right? And also it's an opportunity here, as Yahweh Shai was doing there. He prayed, right? And praying is something you want to do most of the time when you're by yourself, making that supplication, right? Because we know and understand that we're in a situation where we know that we've sinned, we've transgressed. As a matter of fact, this is something that Job said I thought was very, very moving. Let me get this 1 second. This is Job chapter 9, verse 20, and it says, if I justify myself, my own mouth condemn me. If I say I am perfect, it shall also prove me perverse, right? So, if you look at yourself, you realize like, man, I'm perverse. I need healing. I need a physician. You know what I'm saying? You need someone to essentially help you, to heal you, right? The scriptures say that how should a young man cleanse his way, right? By cleaving onto that word, right? So we're kind of in that spirit of, the elect, I should say, and Lord's will, we be those men and few women and children, right? So, we're in that spirit of that woman. When you go into that story of that woman that she had an issue with she was sick, and then she was cleaving onto Yahweh Shai's garment because she understood in her psyche, well, she understood that she was sick, right? And just like how we understand that we're sick and we're cleaving onto that garment, we're cleaving onto Yahweh Shai, right? To essentially make us whole, right? This is Sirach chapter 37, verse 27, and it says, "My son, prove thy soul in thy life, and see what is evil for it, and give not that unto it. For all things are not profitable for all men, and neither have every soul pleasure in everything," right? So there are some things that you will learn being around, well, being by yourself, I should say, not around, but being by yourself. You learn more about yourself. You learn, okay, these are things that I like, and these are things I don't like. These are things I cherish. These are things I need to stay away from. These are things that kind of weigh me down, so I need to cut back on this, because this is essentially detrimental for me. I can't take too much of this, right? So, and this is not really something, as I'm reading this precept, this is not something that I can actually say, okay, this is good for you and this is not good for you, right? Only by you being by yourself and asking yourself these particular questions, you'll know what these things are, right? I can't really say, oh, this is evil for you, or this is really, or good for you, or whatever it is. We're talking about things that are lawful, right? But the point really is that, there are certain things and certain questions that you ask yourselves, being amongst yourselves, knowing is that, okay, there are certain things that are not healthy for me, right? I need to, manage. And then there are some things that are, you might kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? That it's a challenge for you, right? So, and when I say a challenge, I mean a challenge where it's an opportunity for you to grow, right? And learn more, right? So you kind of push yourself to in that avenue to experience what that is, right? I'll use myself as an example. I remember like being in, when I first came into the camp, I never used to like speaking or reading aloud, right? Or speaking in front of people, right? But, being in the camp and learning how to speak, I don't want to say loudly, but speaking with force, it has taught me, and given me the courage to be able to speak in front of people. So I'm able to overcome through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem El Shai, being able to guide me and confront those particular situations. I'm able to actually now confront and speak in front of groups of people without feeling anxious, right? And this is like I'm saying before, these sorts of things might vary. For what might be easy for you might be hard for another, right? That's why I'm going back to the point about self-examination, and this is only information that comes out heavily, when you're by yourself, right? And I also wanted to touch on a point that Paul also talks about, right? Let me get it. Hold on, that's First Corinthians. Okay, this is First Corinthians chapter 7, verse 26, and it says, "I suppose, therefore, this is good for the present distress. I say that it is good for a man so to be. Art thou bound unto a wife? Seek not to be loosed. Art thou loosed from a wife? Seek not a wife," right? So and this is, when you're a young man, this might be a bit of a hard subject or a hard pill, to kind of, stumble, swallow, because, when you learn that, okay, you're an Israelite, and you know that, you can have multiple wives, as a young man, in your zeal, you might seek and try and destroy yourself and destroy your situation by acquiring multiple wives, right? And you may not be able to actually handle more than one woman, right? Because it's a responsibility, right? And I'm kind of more pushing on the fact that, when you're by yourself, you're able to confront yourself in regards to things that, you like and you don't like, and that would include women. But I'm just saying, there's two sides to this, like, I want to touch on. The first thing is that when you're by yourself, without a woman, you're able to confront certain situations and certain struggles that you might be struggling with without a woman's presence being there, because a woman is essentially kind of like a pillar of rest, comfort, when you're going through something, right? So, and and another aspect of this is when you listen to, a lot of these men in the world, because they have that comfort, constantly there, they've never actually tried and dealt with themselves. So they have a hard time confronting themselves and their own thoughts and their own, detestable habits that they might have, right? Remember, this is the kind of culture that promotes a crap ton of entertainment, right? And that also includes women, right? There's TV, there is internet, there is strip clubs, there is sports, there's movies, there's all this kinds of entertainment, and it doesn't promote a certain sentiment of actually looking at yourself, denying yourself, learning how to be considerate, learning how to take on fruits of the spirit, right? Temperance, patience, so on and so forth, long suffering, all those things. You don't get a lot of this information when you're constantly around people, right? Yes, you have moments where you're around brothers, elders, you listen to the apostles, but this is also going to show that, this is just a, being alone is also good for self-reflection, and then looking at yourself and realizing, okay, this situation went well. And then when you go through certain experiences, you're able to share, that with brothers, and then to be able to extract the spiritual nuggets from those situations. Okay, this didn't go well. What can I have I done differently? Okay, this went well. This can be shared with others who are struggling with this, right? So it's constantly, the Lord giving you guidance. The scriptures talk about how wisdom shall meet you in every thought, right? So this is why it's so important. Alone time is so important, man. I 100%, because in this society, in this culture, a lot of people run away from it because they can't deal with themselves. And what proves that point is the fact that in the midst of COVID, people were looking for things to entertain them and divert their minds so they can't deal with themselves. A lot of these people don't deal with themselves. And that's why, when trouble strikes and calamity strikes, they react the way they do because of these things. They go and they start buying a hunt like a lot of packs of toilet paper, or they run to the alcohol, right? So they're very, very unstable without the entertainment, right? This is why, we're having this discussion in regards to, dealing with yourself and resolving yourself, right? Unresolved issues from childhood, this and that and the fourth, right? So I'll read this again, and it says, "Art thou bound from a wife, seek not to be loose. Art thou loose from a wife, seek not a wife," right? And this is a good, if you don't have a woman, it's, that can also be a distraction too, right? So Let me get First John. Actually, as a matter of fact, let me get Sirach 35, because they mentioned prayer. This is Sirach 35, verse 17, and it says, "The prayer of the humble pierceth the clouds, till it come nigh, he will not be comforted. He will not depart till the Most High shall behold and judge righteously and execute judgment," right? So, I'm also reading this is to also capitalize on that alone time, right? One of the things that our forefather Nehemiah, he said, "I and my forefathers have sinned," right? So, understanding like, okay, there is, Jacob's trouble and all these calamities, are going to come to pass. We ask the Lord, forgive us and to essentially remember us too in those times. Hence is the reason for, that solitude and alone time, right? So, I sincerely pray and hope that this lesson was edifying. I kind of rambled quite a little bit there, but just to reflect on the importance of the alone time, right? It's healthy confrontation, for yourself. Anyways, that's about it. But Lord's will, this lesson was edifying. I'd just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone. Until next time, Shalom.